Sitting here in Asia, looking at fertilizer prices, when's your pocketbook going to be affected? Let's put a timeline on it. And when's the rest of the world going to begin to starve? It's all related. Well, we had COVID to look at as an example of when fertilizer prices spike and food spikes. 2011 was another one. This is going to be on the heels, since it is the greatest disruption in fossil fuels in human history. It is also related to the greatest fertilizer disruption in human history. Got some information from the IMF, the World Bank for you, and how expensive the prices are going to creep up and when you can expect them to hit hardest, just based on past cycles and then future forecasts. So hold on. Have you thought prices got wild in COVID? You haven't seen anything yet. But first, Oman, the wild floods happening there. Years worth of rain in a single day, turning the wadis into rivers. Check out the flows coming off the mountainsides there as well, waterfalls beginning. And this is so abnormal that the floods they're experiencing are literally into the thousand-year mark. So they've had previous floods on the hillside that they can measure through time. Again, waterfalls coming down off these same areas. Interestingly, though, it is the Musaddam Peninsula, circled in red there for you. Oman, right up on the tip, right at the Strait of Hormuz. That's why I'm bringing you this one. And I did not know this either, that Oman occupies three different territories on the peninsula, central, and then the larger landmass down on the Arabian Peninsula. Looking out at it, green waters, a little bit of snorkeling, that type of thing there. Old school fishing village, very rocky. There's really nothing to absorb that water when it floods. Where does it go? Straight down the hills into the towns. Let's go back 2,000 years, circa 100 AD, the frankincense trade, the Nabatean kingdom and Petra there. Look at the Parthian Empire. That is now Iran. You can see how the trade routes extended all the way from the Mediterranean clear over into Eastern Indian Ocean, Western Pacific, all the way through Indonesia. Long time for the trades. Areas had a lot of commerce and disruption through wars through the last millennia, multi thousands of years. This is nothing different, except it affects you personally this time, not historically. The real inflation starts in the soil. And that's the thing about the floods, the soils. So, with all of the, I guess, smoke and burning embers of things around in that region, once there's those huge fireworks displays at whatever New Year, Western New Year, Chinese Lunar New Year, whatever it is, usually it rains after that. A lot of generals always talked about fierce battles, with the amount of smoke and gunpowder in the air, that it always rained after fierce battles. So with Oman taking a year's worth of rain in a day, you have to wonder, is any of this smoke related incidents from all these things happening in the Middle East, burning refineries, oil going off everywhere, is this have something to do with what they're seeing weather-wise? Because if it is, then this is just going to be a recurring pattern now on a nightmarish, 1,000-year flood coming every single storm when there's precipitation to be had based on what's happening geopolitically. Let's get into the numbers. World Bank calibrated model estimates every 1% rise in fertilizer prices transmits into a 0.5% or almost half a percent rise in food commodity prices. So if urea is up 29% in 11 days, and we do just half of that, you're looking just ballpark around 14, 15% increase in the food commodities. But as all good things, people do those markups along the way. And now we have to pay to go through the Strait of Hormuz. Even if you get your fertilizer, add 2 million bucks for a ship moving through there. And everything just seems to be getting a little more expensive. Now, 52% year over year, where that's already at a 25% rise in a food price coming up. We usually get a 9 month, 6 to 9 month delay. This is going to continue. So all analysis from every source I've seen is saying fertilizer is going to trend higher. So I was looking at what this is directly right out of the Middle East, urea granular. That red arrow shows you where it has gone. where it has continued to go and will move to needs new bars on top. They're going to have to move this into the thousands after this.
New numbers out of Washington show inflation is on the rise again. Another threat to you, your savings account, and your retirement. Ask yourself an honest question. Does your dollar go as far as it did 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, or even last year? What does the next decade look like for you and your savings? If your portfolio lacks exposure to gold, one of history's most reliable economic hedges, it's time to rethink your strategy. Gold has kept up with inflation and in many periods outpaced it. My friends at Noble Gold Investments specialize in helping people protect their wealth with physical gold and silver. Whether you're rolling over an IRA or making a direct purchase, their team walks you through the entire process and makes it simple. No pressure, just education and experience. And the limited time offer March bonus, get a 1/10th ounce gold American Eagle coin for new qualified accounts. Visit 2030gold.com and discover how easy it is to protect your financial future. That's 2030gold.com. Click on that link in the description box below.
It's going to eclipse anything that we've seen in the COVID era and also 2011. So this is the new gold. If you can't grow food, you can't have a civilization, period. So off Electroverse, crunching some numbers, the world's productive farmlands, if we're going to cut yields, because without the green revolution, there's nitrogenous fertilizers produced with natural gas, which is cut off, force majeure everywhere on natural gas deliveries. Then our carrying capacity for the planet's around 3.5 billion, which is substantially lower than today's population. So that's half or under. Can you imagine the chaos and the economic upheaval? Just the social chaos of just even trying to keep law and order in a food scarce world where people are actually dying on the streets from lack of food. And if you don't get it, your family's not going to eat. This is the thing where so many movies have been done about this. You also have to wonder about this, cultural conditioning that we've seen bevies of movies over the last 20 years. And you start to look at this thing, chess moves you could play and you could game this one out on the food disruption. COVID was nasty. This is going to be nasty plus nastier. Because in addition to the Middle Eastern sources, now we have the Chinese government is exporting outbound shipments of fertilizer. They're a major fertilizer producer. America, imports an enormous amount from China. So if the Middle East is down, China's down, and now we got Russia suspending exports of ammonium nitrate. That's a huge chunk of global fertilizer production that normally goes out into the agricultural world, for a better term. And the food drivers off the IMF, this is the biggie here. Now you're starting to put all these pieces together where the fertilizer price shocks are in, the oil price shocks are in, the 3-year treasury bill shock is in. So that's 3 of 3 so far. And then we're coming to the harvest shock, which will be determined by the amount of fertilizers available for planting over the next 2 months. There's only so far you can go past a planting window before you've lost the year's crops. So this graph off of Platts Middle Eastern fertilizer prices, the previous one I showed you was at $730. That is a jump up from 700. But the sulfur also very much used in different production processes for metal and mining. So metals are going to get more expensive, fertilizers are going to get more expensive, and helium's disrupted there 30% since I'm in Taiwan, and they're having a helium disruption in the semiconductor chip industry of 30%, which means they're cutting also production. Everywhere you look, every possible manufacturing process around the planet's being affected by this. Then right off DD geopolitics, the famine signal, China fertilizer embargo. Now we got the Russian and fertilizer embargo, and we got the Middle East fertilizer embargo. So I don't know how many more embargoes you can go before it's obviously in everybody's face. Now, everybody's going to assure you that this thing is just temporary and we're going to get planted. If we get planted and we don't have fertilizers for mid-season application, and even, a lot of countries buy it as they use it. We're just so lucky we have farm services organizations and USDA that allow farmers to get loans to pre-purchase a lot of these things that they need, at least on the large ag bid side. They can get what they pretty much need: hundreds of thousands of pounds of this, hundreds of thousands of gallons of diesel, all this stuff in advance to get ready. But in many a country across the planet, it is get it as you plant. Like literally that week you'll buy for what you're going to plant. So the rest of the world is going to be affected first and faster than we would be in the US and places like Canada that get farm financing. If they don't have the fertilizers, we're looking at a 50% yield, half of what's normally achieved by applying all these fertilizers. Now, not even now, what happens with the pesticides? Well, if we don't have that, then the insects are going to be a problem. A lot of things would be better left off of our crops, adjuvants, shall we say, like pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, better left off our crops for healthier foods. But those things also increase our yields. And without those yield increases, then they're working the math on each 10% reduction in food takes up your food price a certain percentage. That's regionally dependent. So again, what we might experience in America would be different than what they would experience in Bangladesh or what they might experience in Pakistan. But everywhere you go, the disruptions are these transit points for other goods and services across the world. Like if India gets disrupted because of food, like there's a huge amount of transshipment happening through India. Like what happens if it goes south in Hong Kong or Singapore, Taiwan? There's so many places where if it's disrupted, all these transmodal modes of shipping to get goods from point A to point B gets more disrupted and it just spirals out of control. So the number one thing is the food, the fertilizers, and the transportation, the availability of that to be able to grow foods cheaply enough that society still holds itself together. And we've seen through history routinely where it doesn't and it hasn't. And we, as archaeologists today, find the remnants of those previous great civilizations that couldn't get their food production together enough. And that's why they collapsed. So, again, the best thing we can do is look to the past to see the future. And you'll see the spikes here 2011, 12. That was a big one for fertilizer, food shocks, price up. Things sort of stabilized. COVID came back in, and that's that 35% increase there in 2022 with the Ukraine, Russia intervention there. That is all part of that tied in. So if we really move it forward, you can see there's about a 6 to 9 month delay between some sort of geopolitical event, natural events, disruptions to the price spike peak. So we're looking at Black Sea grain initiatives being put in where the world had to give fertilizers and get pricing stabilized because of that conundrum in one of the world's largest bread baskets, Ukraine, took 30 million tons offline. Well, that's your peak about 6 months after. So if we look at the price shock pass through, meaning when the shocks hit, where is those costs passed on to and how long is the start to finish date on it? So we're about a month into this EDON thing here. So that'll be month number 1. You're starting to see the prices run up, but this is a very different animal we're looking at. So as we approach month 9 for at least high trade open countries and high income countries, it very much follows the same trend. The price spike should start hitting us about 9 months from now. But how high is it going to go? The event's not over. So the disruptions continue and the prices will continue to continue, if that makes sense. So here's the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization from the United Nations, putting out their cereal price index. You notice that we're sitting at 108 right now. But where did the previous spikes occur? In the exact same time, the 2011 disruption, 2022 events that caused this spike as well. So where do you think we would sit on a timeline of disruption? So the World Cereal Price Index, and we're going to get in a little closer here. Notice the spike 2022, that is subsequent because of disruptions in Ukraine. One country, not global, regional for a better term, but highly wide, because Africa imported a huge amount of grain from Ukraine and their grains were cut off. World Food Price Index, that main spike 2022. They're following a pattern. What do you see in the World Vegetable Oil Price Shock Index? 2022 peak. Dairy price index peaked 2022 and we're peaking now again. Well, that's going to probably go into a triple top on this one, I would expect. And as we see the meat price index, 2022 peak, but we are back eclipsing that even now. It's going higher on the meats. So everywhere you look, you're starting to see the same repeating patterns. So 9 months from now will be far higher than 2022 expectations for peak on pricing. And here's one last little cherry on the top to wrap out tonight. The toll process requiring 2 to 4 million per tanker slash break bark, whatever it is, cargo vessel, oil carrier, LNG carrier, whatever. They're charging 2 to 4 million per shipment to allow it to pass. That's a new toll road on our world. So everything from this point forward is going to cost you at least this much. Passed on cost. This is just going to be a new toll that you're going to pay for life, because this area of the world is now going to have a pass-through cost on it permanently. And when I say that, even the US is talking with the other hand saying, yeah, we can control it and we can have a continuous flow of money for you for this toll system for every vessel outbound or inbound forever. So here, that's just another cost that lays on top. 4 million for a single ship. Well, that's going to be every ship. That's 30% of everything on the world is going to have an extra $2 to 4 million tacked on top of it. That cost is going to you. Their company is not going to eat that, right to you. So if you things got expensive, if you think that so far, this is going to be a continuous tax. You know, they were talking about global taxes for emissions and that sort of thing. This is that in a different form, different packaging, prettier bow on it, same, but different. And as we move forward with fertilizer pricing, if it keeps going up and the amount available continues downward, then this is going to be a very significant year in terms of how foods are going to get so expensive so fast. Like you're watching the fertilizer prices go up 20, 30% in a week. When food prices start to trend on this and follow, once especially right around July, they get a good gauge of, harvest health and, crops progress and all these things. They run through and do all the wheat and corn and that sort of thing in the US around that time, July. If it goes to the low point and people are just freaking out in the ag space, we're absolutely going to have to go to some sort of universal basic income. People won't be able to afford the food. Now, many will. Don't get me wrong. Many will. But in the scheme of things, many won't. So how do you keep that segment of society satiated and at least mentally stable enough that they can eat, that, next week they can still have food? This is far beyond SNAP. This is way, way back into half the country is going to need some sort of money. And that's great that people can get it for assistance, but at some point there's going to be animosity. Like, why am I paying 5 times food price and those people are getting it free? It's going to come into that sort of, next contagion. You already can see how that's gamed out to move the world in a certain direction. You always have to have people infighting, right? So that'll be another one. When food spikes, UBI comes in, and the people who are really making money or can afford it are going to be super angry that they need to pay, and their quality of life is going to reduce. This is just so routine through history. It shouldn't be even shocking. You should just look at the history book and go, oh, it's our turn now. What happened every single time since then? These societies become complacent, like it's never going to happen to us. This is just a repeating cycle in history, and I can't believe more people aren't getting ready for it. So please prepare to grow your own food. We're going to get the announcement that you're going to have to start growing some of your own food. This revival of the Victory Garden is already on the books. This thing is going to stretch, and doesn't seem to be any sight that you can see where it's ending. It's just this is a new movement of the world perpetually, forever, for the rest of our lives in this new direction. This is that pivot point. Needed, manufactured, curated, and forced down our throats. So a good source of seeds that I love and I use and I plant in my own personal garden, trueleafmarket.com, heirloom organic seeds for any grow zone on the planet. I talked about them for well over a decade. I still use it. Love that company. Check out that link in the description box below and My Patriot Supply. I definitely have their storable food kits myself because I believe in the company. These are 2 of my recommendations that might help you get ready. They have a 1-week kit, a 3-day kit, a 1-month kit for storable foods just to dip your toe in the water. So you're not spending an enormous amount and not knowing what you're getting. But check both of these out. This world we're moving into is getting stranger by the minute. Like I said, I'm just not sure when this ends, but one thing assured is food is going to go up again in price. Are you prepared for that? You can be when others aren't going to be. So I'll catch you next video talking about the fuel shortages and rationing here in Asia. Since I'm here now, this channel is moving over to fertilizer and fuel reports along with strange weather, but stay glued with me as I travel around Asia and get into the thick of all these disruptions just so I can see it firsthand, bring it to you firsthand, and cut through the curated news muckraking to try to get you to believe in a certain way. Are these stories real out here or not? Well, let's travel around and see if they are.